The letter trembled in
Tại sao lại
Lara's
là
hands.
tôi?
She had
Định
found
mệnh
it
an
tucked
bài.
inside her mother's old
Nó
jewelry
quá đau
box,
đớn.
sealed with wax, the color of dried blood. The box itself had been locked away for 8 years, hidden in the back of her wardrobe, where dust gathered like forgotten memories. But this morning, something had called to her, a whisper in her bones, a knowing she could not name. Her fingers broke the seal, the wax crumbled like ash. The paper inside was yellowed with age, covered in her mother's familiar handwriting. Alara's throat tightened as she began to read. My dearest Alara, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have reached your 23rd year. By now, Meridiana will have told you many things, that your blood is cursed, that your womb is barren, that you are broken, incomplete, unworthy of standing beside a king. My darling girl, I need you to know the truth. None of it is real. You are not cursed. You are gifted. The women of our line carry something precious, something rare. We call it the sight. It awakens at 23 just as it did for me and my mother before me. The sight allows us to see what others cannot. Bonds between souls, wounds that fester beneath the skin, truth hidden behind lies. Meridiana knows what you are. She has been preparing for this day since you were 15. The supplements she gives you, the tonics, the teas, they are poison, Alara. Slow and subtle, designed to cloud your mind and suppress your gift. I discovered her plan 3 days ago. I confronted her, and tonight, I believe she will kill me. I am writing this as the sun sets. I have hidden everything you will need in my sealed room. Lord Octavian has the key. He will give it to you when the time is right. When your gift awakens, you will see clearly. You will understand what has been done to you, and you will have the strength to rise. Remember, my love, a woman who bends does not break. She gathers her strength, and then she rises. Always yours, Mama Alara's vision blurred. Tears fell onto the page, smudging the ink, but the words remained. Solid, real, undeniable. She pressed the letter to her chest and closed her eyes. Outside her window, the castle bells began to toll. The sound echoed through stone corridors, announcing what this day would bring. The displacement ceremony would begin at noon. In 3 hours, Alara would kneel before the kingdom and surrender her place as the future Luna. She would watch another woman take what should have been hers. She would bow, step aside, and disappear into the shadows where unwanted women went to be forgotten. At least, that was what everyone expected. But Alara's mother had written these words 8 years ago, knowing this day would come. And if Meridiana had killed Liana to keep her secret safe, then perhaps those secrets were worth dying for. Perhaps they were worth fighting for. Alara folded the letter carefully and tucked it into the bodice of her nightgown, close to her heart. Then she stood and moved to the small table where her morning tea waited. The cup sat on its saucer, steam curling upward like beckoning fingers. Beside it, the daily supplement, a small glass vial filled with clear liquid. Meridiana had brought it herself as she did every morning with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. For your health, she always said, to keep you strong. Alara picked up the vial and held it to the light. The liquid inside was colorless, odorless, harmless in appearance. But her mother's words echoed in her mind. They are poison, Alara, slow and subtle. She had been drinking this for 8 years, since she was 15, since the month her mother died. Alara's hand began to shake, not from fear, from rage. She walked to the window and opened it. Cool morning air rushed in, carrying the scent of rain and distant pine forests. Below, the castle gardens stretched out in manicured perfection. Roses bloomed in careful rows. Fountains sparkled in the pale sunlight. Everything looked so beautiful, so carefully arranged, so controlled. Alara turned the vial upside down and watched the liquid pour out. It splashed onto the stone below, disappearing into cracks between the cobblestones. Gone, as if it had never existed. She set the empty vial back on the table. Then she poured her tea out the window as well. If today was the day she would bow, then she would do it with a clear mind. She would see exactly what was being done to her, and she would remember every detail. A knock sounded at her door. Alara's heart jumped, but she forced her voice to remain steady. Come in. The door opened. Meridiana entered, flanked by 2 servants carrying a dress. But this was not the white silk and lace a bride would wear. This was gray, coarse fabric, simple cut, the color of stone and ash and things best forgotten. The ceremonial garment of the displaced. Meridiana's smile was warm, practiced, perfect. Good morning, child. I trust you slept well. Alara met her stepmother's eyes. Meridiana was 45, but she looked younger. Skin smooth as porcelain. Hair the color of dark honey. swept up in an elegant twist. She wore deep burgundy today, rich and regal, the color of a woman who belonged in a castle, the color of a woman who had won. I slept well enough, Alara said quietly. Thank you, Meridiana gestured to the servants. They laid the gray dress across Ilara's bed with careful reverence, as if it were something sacred instead of a symbol of shame. I wanted to bring this myself, Meridiana continued, moving closer. Her voice dropped to something almost gentle, almost kind. This is not an easy day for you, I know. But you are doing the right thing, Alara, the noble thing. Alara said nothing. She watched Meridiana's face, searching for cracks in the mask, but there were none. The woman was flawless. The kingdom needs heirs, Meridiana went on. King Theron needs a Luna who can provide them, and you cannot give him that. Your bloodline is cursed, Alara finished softly. Yes, you have told me. Something flickered in Meridiana's eyes. Satisfaction, perhaps, or triumph. I only want what is best for you, child, for all of us. Aurelia will be a good Luna. She is young, healthy, strong, and when she gives the king his heirs, the kingdom will prosper. Alara felt the letter pressed against her skin, hidden beneath her nightgown. Her mother's words burned there like a brand. None of it is real. Will I be allowed to attend the ceremony, Alara asked. Of course. Meridiana's smile widened. Tradition demands it. You will kneel before the altar, you will bow to Aurelia, and you will speak the words of release. It is how these things are done. I see. And Ilara, Meridiana added, her voice taking on a sharper edge, remember to bow deeply. Show the kingdom you accept this willingly. We would not want anyone to think you were reluctant. That would be unseemly. The threat was delicate, veiled, but unmistakable. Alara nodded slowly. I understand. Meridiana reached out and touched Alara's cheek with cool fingers. For just a moment, something like regret crossed her face, but it vanished so quickly, Alara wondered if she had imagined it. You are a good girl, Meridiana whispered. Your mother would be proud. The words struck like a blade between the ribs. Alara's breath caught, but she did not flinch. She held Meridiana's gaze and let the silence stretch. Finally, Meridiana withdrew her hand. She turned to the servants. Help her dress. We begin in 2 hours. The door closed behind her, and Alara was alone with the gray dress and the servants who would not meet her eyes. She let them do their work in silence. They bathed her in cold water. They brushed her dark hair until it shone like polished wood. They braided it away from her face in a simple plait, the way her mother used to wear it. When they brought the gray dress, Alara touched the fabric. It was deliberately coarse, uncomfortable against her skin, a reminder of what she was giving up, a punishment disguised as ceremony. But as the servants fastened the laces and smoothed the skirt, Alara felt something shift inside her chest. Not surrender, not resignation, clarity. Her mother had worn gray once. Alara remembered it now, a flash of memory from childhood. Liana in a simple gray gown, kneeling in the garden with dirt on her hands, planting roses. Why do you wear such plain dresses, Mama? Young Alara had asked. Liana had smiled. Because gray does not demand attention, my love. Gray lets you see clearly, and sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is see what others overlook. The servants finished and stepped back. One of them, an older woman with kind eyes, whispered something so soft Alara almost missed it. Be strong, my lady. Then they were gone, and Alara stood alone before the mirror. The woman looking back at her was a stranger, 23 years old, but her eyes held the weariness of someone much older. Dark hair pulled back from a pale face. Gray fabric hanging loose on a frame, grown thin from years of poison disguised as medicine. But beneath the exhaustion, beneath the gray, something else glimmered. Her mother's daughter. Alara straightened her spine. She lifted her chin. And she tucked her mother's letter deeper into her bodice, close to her heart where it belonged. Another knock at the door, but this one was different. Heavier, more hesitant. Come in, Alara called. The door opened to reveal Lord Octavian Greythorn. He was 58, broad-shouldered despite his age, with silver hair and a weathered face that spoke of decades spent protecting things he loved. He had been her mother's closest friend, her confidant. And after Liana's death, he had watched over Alara from a distance, bound by promises Alara did not yet understand. Lord Octavian, she said softly. He entered and closed the door behind him. His eyes swept over her gray dress, and his jaw tightened with barely suppressed anger. Alara. Just her name, but it held everything. Grief, regret, determination. He crossed the room in 3 strides and took her hands in his. His grip was warm, steady, real. Your mother made me promise something, he said quietly. I swore I would wait until you turned 23. Until today. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small object. A key, old iron ornate, with a wolf's head carved into the handle. This opens your mother's room, the one that has been sealed since she died. Ilara's heart began to pound. The letter, the room, everything her mother had hidden. Liana knew this day would come, Octavian continued. His voice was rough with emotion. She knew what Meridiana was planning, and she prepared for it. He pressed the key into Ilara's palm and closed her fingers around it. Go there after the ceremony. Everything you need is inside. And Ilara, he leaned closer, his eyes fierce. You do not have to do this. You can fight. You can challenge the displacement. I will stand with you. Others will too. But Ilara shook her head slowly. Something in her chest was pulling tight, like a string wound around her ribs. She needed to see this through. She needed to understand what her mother had left behind. I need to know, she whispered. I need to see it all clearly. Octavian studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded, just once. You are your mother's daughter, he said, and she was the strongest woman I ever knew. He stepped back and placed his fist over his heart, a warrior salute. Whatever happens today, remember, you are not alone. Then he was gone, and Ilara stood with her mother's key clutched in her hand, feeling the weight of it like an anchor in a storm. The castle bells tolled again. 1 hour until the ceremony. Ilara tucked the key into a hidden pocket in her dress. Then she walked to her window and looked out over the kingdom that was supposed to be hers. Beyond the gardens, beyond the castle walls, the forest stretched dark and endless. Wolves ran there free beneath the moon. Her people, her pack. They deserved better than lies. They deserved the truth. And today, one way or another, they would see it. The great hall of Castle Blackmore had been transformed into something Ilara barely recognized. Where once there had been simplicity and strength, stone walls, iron chandeliers, the royal banner hanging proud, there was now an excess of white and gold. Flowers cascaded from every surface. Roses and lilies and hothouse orchids that must have cost a fortune. Ribbons wound around the pillars like gilded serpents. The scent of jasmine hung thick and cloying, sweet enough to make her stomach turn. Aurelia's taste, Meridiana's money. Ilara entered through a side door, as was proper for the displaced. She could hear the murmur of the crowd already gathering in the main hall. Nobility from across the kingdom, all dressed in their finest, all here to witness what they thought would be a simple transfer of power. A servant guided her to her mark, a small square on the floor, outlined in white chalk. This was where she would stand during the ceremony. Visible enough to be seen, invisible enough to be forgotten. Ilara took her place and folded her hands. Her heart was beating too fast, but she breathed through it, steady, calm, clear. The hall filled slowly. She recognized faces in the crowd. Some looked at her with pity, others with barely concealed satisfaction. A few, mostly older lords and ladies who had known her mother, met her eyes with something that looked like sorrow. Lord Octavian entered and positioned himself near the front. He did not look at her, but she felt his presence like a shield at her back. The ceremonial drums began. The sound rolled through the hall like distant thunder. Every conversation ceased. The crowd parted, creating a clear path from the main entrance to the altar where the high priest waited. And there, framed by the towering oak doors, stood Aurelia. Ilara's stepsister was 19 years old and radiant. Golden hair cascaded over bare shoulders. Her gown was white silk and cloth of gold, fitted perfectly to her young body. Diamonds glittered at her throat, her wrists, her ears. She looked like something from a fairy tale, a princess stepping into her destiny. Beside her, offering his arms, stood their father. Lord Cassian Ashford had aged since Liana's death. His dark hair had gone silver at the temples. His shoulders stooped slightly, as if carrying weight he could not set down. But when his eyes swept the crowd and landed briefly on Ilara, they held no warmth. Only distance. Only resignation. Only the careful blankness of a man who had learned not to look too closely at his own choices. He looked away without acknowledgement and began walking Aurelia down the aisle. The crowd murmured appreciation. Ilara heard fragments of conversation drifting past her. Absolutely stunning, is she not? A proper Luna at last. About time the king put aside that cursed girl. Poor thing, but it is for the best, really. The cursed girl. Was that what they called her? Ilara supposed it was easier than the truth. Easier to believe in curses than to question why a healthy young woman would willingly surrender her future. The procession reached the altar. Aurelia released their father's arm and ascended the steps alone, her movements practiced and graceful. She had been preparing for this moment her entire life. The high priest raised his staff. He was ancient, with a white beard that reached his navel and eyes that had witnessed 100 such ceremonies. "People of Blackmore," he intoned. His voice carried through the hall with unnatural clarity. "We gather today to witness a sacred bond, a binding of souls, a union that will strengthen our kingdom and secure our future." Ilara felt the pressure of tradition bearing down on her shoulders. This was the moment when she would be required to formally surrender her claim. She stepped forward from her chalk square. Every eye in the hall turned toward her. The weight of their attention pressed against her skin like physical force. Judgment, pity, curiosity, relief. All of it washing over her in waves. But beneath her bodice, her mother's letter burned like a coal against her heart. "You are not cursed. You are gifted." Ilara walked to the center of the aisle, directly between the altar and the watching crowd. She could feel Meridiana's eyes on her from the front row, could feel Aurelia's nervous energy radiating from the altar steps, could feel something else too, something pulling at her chest, a connection she did not understand, stretching toward the throne behind the altar where her thoughts scattered as the high priest spoke again. "Before the binding may proceed, tradition demands acknowledgement from the one who steps aside." His eyes found hers, ancient and unreadable. "Ilara Ashford, former betrothed of Alphaking Theron of Blackmore, do you willingly surrender your claim?" The hall fell silent, not a breath, not a whisper. Ilara's wolf stirred inside her, but not with the cry of mate, mate, mate that stories told of. Instead, her wolf was silent, eerily quiet, as if something held its jaws shut. And in that strange silence, Ilara understood. Whatever Meridiana had been giving her all these years had done more than cloud her mind. It had muzzled her very soul. But the poison was wearing off now. She had not taken this morning's dose. And beneath the suppression, beneath the lies, something was waking up. Ilara lifted her chin and spoke clearly. "I step aside." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but Ilara was not finished. "Not because I am cursed," she continued, her voice carrying in the silence. "Not because I am barren. Not because I am unworthy." The murmur grew louder, confused, uncertain. "I step aside because I have been told these things about myself since I was 15 years old. I have been taught to believe that my blood is poison, that my body is broken, that I have no right to stand beside a king." Meridiana rose from her seat. "Lara," she hissed, "that is enough." But Ilara kept speaking. "I step aside because I was raised to bend, to submit, to accept what I was told without question. And today I kneel before this kingdom, not in acceptance, but as witness." She turned to look directly at Aurelia. "I want it recorded. I want every person here to know. I never believed I was cursed. I only believed what I was told." The high priest's staff struck the ground once, twice. "Do you acknowledge your inability to fulfill the duties of Luna?" he demanded. "Do you release your betrothed from all obligation?" Ilara's hands trembled, but she held them steady at her sides. "I do." "Then kneel, Ilara Ashford, and bow before your successor." For a moment, Ilara thought she might refuse. She could feel the rebellion rising in her chest, hot and fierce. But her mother's words echoed again. "A woman who bends does not break." So Ilara lowered herself to the cold stone floor. Her knees struck hard, the impact jarring through her bones. She bent forward, pressing her forehead close to the ground. She gathers her strength. The hall waited in breathless silence, and then she rises. But before Ilara could rise, before the ceremony could continue, a voice cut through the sacred hall like a blade through silk. "No!" Ilara's head snapped up. Standing at the top of the altar steps, having appeared without anyone noticing, was King Theron himself. He was dressed in ceremonial black, the color kings wore during binding rites. His dark hair was pulled back from a face too severe to be called handsome, too striking to be ignored. 28 years old and already weathered by the weight of a crown he had never wanted. But something was wrong. His skin, usually bronze from hours of training outdoors, had a grayish pallor. His cheekbones seemed sharper than Ilara remembered, as if he had lost weight he could not afford to lose. And when he stepped forward, descending toward her, she saw him waver. Just slightly, just for an instant, as if his legs were not entirely trustworthy. "Your Majesty," the high priest stammered, "the ceremony requires her acknowledgement before—" She has acknowledged enough, Theron interrupted. His voice was rough, strained. I have watched her kneel. I have heard her words. And now I am telling you, telling all of you, that I reject them. A gasp rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. Reject? Aurelia's voice came out high and thin. You cannot reject a willing displacement. The law states that an Alpha King may claim any mate of his choosing. Theron cut her off. His eyes never left Alara's face. That right supersedes displacement protocols, and I am invoking it now. He descended another step, then another, moving slowly, carefully, as if each movement cost him. The crowd erupted into chaos, voices shouting, some in outrage, some in shock. Meridiana's sharp protest cutting through everything. But Theron kept walking until he stood directly before Alara's kneeling form. Up close, she could see how truly unwell he looked. His skin was cold. She could feel it radiating from him even without contact. His breathing was shallow, labored, and his eyes, storm gray and fierce, held something desperate beneath the iron control. Something almost afraid. Rise, Alara, he said, softer this time, but no less commanding. Your Majesty, Alara whispered. I cannot. You can. He extended his hand to her. His fingers trembled, barely perceptible. But she noticed. She noticed everything about him in that moment. The pallor of his skin, the slight shake in his jaw, the way he was using every ounce of strength just to stand upright. You will, he continued. His voice dropped lower, meant only for her. I will not bind myself to anyone but you. The hall erupted completely then, Meridiana screaming something about propriety and law, Aurelia calling for the high priest to intervene, Lord Cassian's voice trying to restore order that no one heeded. But all of it seemed distant, muffled, unimportant, because Theron was looking at Alara like he was drowning and she was air. And despite everything, despite the lies she believed, despite all the reasons this was impossible, Alara placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, and the world shifted. Heat flooded through her palm where their skin touched. Not fever heat, not sickness, something else. Something that sang in her bones and made her wolf finally lift its head and howl. Not with words, not with recognition, but with something deeper. A knowing that transcended language. Theron's eyes widened. He felt it too. She could see it in the way his breath caught, the way his grip tightened. Come with me, he said roughly. Now. He pulled her to her feet. The hall spun around them, voices rising in protest, but Theron ignored them all. He kept Alara's hand locked in his and turned to face the assembly. The wedding is postponed, he announced, his voice carried despite its roughness. I will meet with the council in 1 hour. Until then, this gathering is dismissed. The high priest sputtered. Your Majesty, you cannot simply— I am the king, Theron said quietly, and I can do exactly as I please. He did not wait for a response. Still holding Alara's hand, he strode toward the side exit. She had to half run to keep pace, her gray dress tangling around her legs. Behind them, the hall descended into chaos. But Theron did not look back, and neither did Alara. The private council chamber was smaller than the great hall, but no less imposing. A long table of dark wood dominated the center. Chairs lined both sides. Windows looked out over the kingdom, and from this height, everything seemed distant, peaceful, controlled. The people gathered inside, however, were anything but peaceful. Meridiana stood by the window, her composure cracked for the first time in Alara's memory. Aurelia sat in a chair, weeping into a handkerchief more decorative than functional. Lord Cassian hovered between them, uncertainty written across every line of his face. The council members sat around the table with expressions ranging from outrage to bewilderment, and at the head of the table sat Theron. Alara had been placed in the chair to his immediate right, the Luna's chair, though she had not been formally installed. The wrongness of it pressed against her skin like ill-fitting clothes. This is madness, Meridiana said. Her voice was carefully modulated despite the anger burning in her eyes. Your Majesty, you cannot simply override a displacement conducted according to law. Theron leaned back in his chair. His color was slightly better now, Alara noticed. Not healthy, but not the deathly pallor from before. I believe I just did, he said mildly. The girl is barren, Meridiana pressed. Cursed, she cannot provide you with heirs. And yet I have chosen her. Meridiana's hands clenched at her sides. The kingdom requires succession, Your Majesty. The council requires— The council advises, Theron interrupted. His voice was soft, but edged with warning. It does not command. Or has something changed since I took the throne? Silence fell over the room like a heavy blanket. Alara watched the exchange with growing unease. In the 3 years of their betrothal, she had rarely seen Theron engage so directly. He had always seemed removed, present but not fully engaged, as if some essential part of him was elsewhere. But now, though diminished physically, he radiated an intensity that made even the eldest council members look away. "Your Majesty," Lord Varys spoke carefully. He was the eldest counselor, white-haired and cautious. "Lady Meridiana raises legitimate concerns. The bloodline is a matter of none of your concern," Theron finished. "Forgive me, but the royal succession is precisely our concern." "Then let me make this clear," Theron said. He leaned forward, and Alara saw his hand move beneath the table, pressing against his chest. The gesture lasted only a moment, but she noticed. He is in pain, she realized. Not just pale, not just tired, actually suffering and hiding it. "If Alara cannot bear children," Theron continued, "then I will die without an heir. That was always a possibility. I have made my peace with it." Something flickered across his face then. Pain, quickly suppressed. "The wedding will proceed in 3 days," he announced, rising from his chair. He moved carefully as if conserving energy. "Alara will be examined by healers of my choosing, not yours, Lady Meridiana, and we will discover the truth of these claims once and for all." "And if the truth is what we have always said?" Meridiana demanded, defiance returning to her voice. Theron paused at the door. He did not turn around. "Then I will marry her anyway," he said, "and you will bow to your new queen, or leave my kingdom. The choice is yours." He left. The chamber erupted into chaos behind him, but Alara was already on her feet, following. She found him leaning against the wall just around the corner. One hand braced against stone. His breathing labored and harsh. "Your Majesty," she began. "Not here," he said through gritted teeth. "My chambers, now." He pushed off the wall and began walking, or trying to. After 3 steps, his leg buckled beneath him. Alara moved without thinking. She slid under his arm, taking his weight against her shoulder. He was heavier than she expected, solid muscle despite his gaunt appearance, and cold. So cold that her skin prickled where they touched. "Don't," he started. "If you collapse in this corridor, everyone will know something is wrong," Alara said quietly. "Let me help you." He stared at her for a long moment. Surprise flickered across his face, as if he was not used to being challenged. Then he nodded once and let her take some of his weight. They moved slowly through the castle. Alara guided them through servant passages she knew from her years as unofficial Luna in training. Narrow hallways where they would not be seen, where the king's weakness would remain secret. By the time they reached the royal chambers, Theron was barely conscious. His weight dragged on her shoulders. His breathing came in shallow gasps. Alara helped him to a chair by the fireplace. The fire was barely embers, the room uncomfortably cold. He collapsed into the seat with a sound that was almost a groan. "Thank you," he said roughly. But Alara did not respond. She was already moving, adding logs to the fire, stirring the embers until flames caught and began throwing warmth into the space. She found extra furs in a chest by the bed and draped them over his shoulders without asking permission. When she finally stepped back, Theron was watching her with an expression she could not decipher. "You have done this before," he said. "Cared for someone who could not care for themselves." "My mother." The words came out before Alara could stop them. "Before she died, she was cold at the end, too. Always cold, no matter how many blankets I piled on her." Something flickered in his gray eyes. "How did she die?" "A wasting sickness." Alara paused, old grief stirring in her chest. The healers could not identify it. She just faded a little more each day until there was nothing left to fade. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken recognition. "That is what is happening to you, Trine," Alara said quietly. It was not a question. "Is it not?" Theron's jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he would deny it, dismiss her, send her away and retreat behind the wall of cold courtesy he had maintained for 3 years. Instead, he said, "Yes." One word, an admission that changed everything. "For how long?" "It began the night of our betrothal." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Poetic, is it not? The moment I should have been celebrating my future, I started dying." 3 years. He had been dying for 3 years, hiding it from everyone. "Does anyone know?" Alara asked. "My personal healer, my wolf." Theron paused. "And now you." The trust implicit in those words settled over Alara like a physical weight. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "You have barely spoken to me in 3 years. And now you stop my displacement, insist on marrying me, reveal your deepest secret. Why?" Theron's eyes met hers, And for the first time, she saw through the mask he wore. Beneath the king, beneath the cold control, there was desperation. There was fear. And there was something else. Something that made her wolf keen with recognition. Because you are the only thing that makes the cold bearable, he said quietly. When you are near me, the ice in my chest recedes. When you are far away, it spreads. And today, while I'm watching you kneel in that hall, watching you prepare to walk out of my life forever. He stopped, swallowed hard. The pain was unbearable, as if something inside me was being torn apart. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. Your wolf, she repeated slowly. What does your wolf say about me? Theron's eyes flashed gold for an instant, the color of his beast rising to the surface. He says you are ours, he admitted. He has been saying it since the night we met. But something is blocking the bond, clouding it. I can feel you there, but I cannot reach you. It is like grasping smoke. The mate bond. He was describing a mate bond, corrupted, blocked, but present. That is impossible, Alara whispered. I am betrothed to you politically. There is no fated connection between us. Are you certain of that? Theron leaned forward, his gaze piercing. Or is that simply what you have been told? The question struck her like a blow. She thought of Meridiana's endless reminders that the betrothal was merely political. She thought of the supplements she had taken every morning for 8 years. She thought of the way her wolf had been silent, muzzled. She thought of her mother's letter. You are not cursed. You are gifted. What if everything she believed was a lie? I need to examine you, she heard herself say. Theron tilted his head, confused. My mother taught me things, Alara continued, about bonds, about what can corrupt them. She stepped closer, placed her hand on his chest, directly over his heart. May I? He nodded, just once. Alara closed her eyes and reached inward. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, a lesson from childhood she had almost forgotten. Feel for the threads, little one. Every wolf carries them. Gold for strength, silver for wisdom, red for the bond that ties soul to soul. Alara had not tried this since she was a child, since before the supplements began. But now, with her mind clear and her mother's words burning in her heart, she reached, and there, beneath her palm, she felt it. A bond, a mate bond, thick as rope and golden red with potential. But wrapped around it, squeezing it tight, choking it like vines strangling a tree, was something dark, something oily and wrong. There is a curse on you, she breathed. Someone has cursed your mate bond. Theron's hand closed over hers where it rested on his chest. Can you remove it? I do not know. Alara opened her eyes. But there is more. The supplements Meridiana gave me, every day for 8 years. What if they were suppressing my bond too? Stop taking them, Theron said immediately. Starting now. If I do, and if the curse on my bloodline is real, then we will face it together. His eyes held hers, fierce and unwavering. No more lies. No more hiding. Whatever we are, we discover it together. Agreed? Her wolf surged forward with a cry of joy. Agreed, Alara whispered. And when his cold fingers intertwined with hers, she felt something she had not felt in 8 years. Hope. The morning after Theron's confession, Alara woke before dawn in the small guest chamber she had been given. The room was simple. A bed, a wardrobe. A window that looked out over the eastern forest where mist gathered between the trees like ghosts. She had not slept in the royal chambers with Theron. Not yet. That would come after the wedding, after everything was made official. But lying alone in the dark, she could still feel the phantom warmth of his hand in hers, could still feel the wrongness wrapped around his heart. She rose and dressed in plain clothes, not the gray dress of displacement. That had been left crumpled on the floor of Theron's chambers like a shed skin. Instead, she wore simple brown, the color of earth and growing things, the color of beginning again. When she made her way to Theron's chambers, she found him already awake. He sat by the window, wrapped in furs, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. He looked better. Not well, but the deathly pallor had receded slightly. His breathing came easier. He turned when she entered, and something in his expression softened. You came, he said. Did you think I would not? I was not certain what to expect. He gestured to the chair beside him. In 3 years, we have barely spoken, and now you know my darkest secret. Alara sat. The chair was still warm from the fire that had burned through the night. I have a request, she said quietly. Name it. Give me 7 days. 7 days to learn what my mother's gift truly is. 7 days to understand what has been done to us. And then we marry. Theron studied her face. Why 7? Because that is how long transformation takes. 7 days for wounds to begin healing. 7 days for the body to remember what it forgot. Her voice dropped. 7 days to see clearly. He was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. 7 days. Sati, he agreed, but on one condition. What condition? You spend them here, with me. He met her eyes. I have wasted 3 years not knowing you. I will not waste another moment. Something warm unfurled in Alara's chest. Agreed, she whispered. And so it began. The first day, Alara simply sat with Theron and learned to breathe in rhythm with him. This was what her mother's journal had described, the foundation of the sight, not magic, not supernatural power, but the ability to slow down, to notice, to feel what others felt. Sit with me, she had written in careful script. Feel the pulse of the person before you. Match your breath to theirs, and slowly you will begin to see what they carry. So Alara sat across from Theron in the morning light and breathed. In, out, in, out. At first, she felt nothing but her own heartbeat, her own fears and uncertainties crowding her mind. But gradually, as the sun climbed higher and the room grew warm, something shifted. She began to feel him, not his thoughts, not his words, but the weight he carried. A pressure in her own chest that was not hers. Cold where there should be warmth. Emptiness where there should be connection. When she opened her eyes, Theron was watching her. What do you see? He asked quietly. Pain, she said. Old and deep. You have been carrying it so long, you barely notice it anymore. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. Tell me about it, Alara said. Tell me how it began. So he did. Theron had become king at 19, too young, too unprepared. His father had died suddenly, killed in a hunting accident that may or may not have been an accident at all. The council had circled him like wolves around wounded prey, each trying to influence the young king to their advantage. He had learned quickly to trust no one, to show nothing, to become cold and controlled because warmth was a weakness that could be exploited. And then 3 years ago, the betrothal had been arranged, a political alliance. Lord Cassian's territory joining with the crown. His daughter offered as a seal on the treaty. Theron had agreed because it was expected, because it strengthened the kingdom, because he had long since stopped hoping for anything more than duty. But the night of the betrothal ceremony, something had changed. I saw you, he said, his voice rough with memory, standing beside your father. You wore blue, your hair was down, and when you looked at me, just for a moment, I felt something I had not felt in years. What? Hope. Alara's throat tightened. But then the cold began, Theron continued. That very night, I woke freezing, my chest tight. I thought it was illness. The healers found nothing. And as the days passed, I realized the only time the cold receded was when you were near. Why did you not tell me? Because I did not understand it. He looked away. Because I had been taught that feelings were dangerous, that connection was weakness. So I buried it. I pushed you away. And the colder I became, the harder it was to reach for you. A tear slipped down Alara's cheek. I thought you did not want me, she whispered. Theron's hand found hers. I have wanted nothing else for 3 years, he said. I just forgot how to show it. The second day Seraphina arrived, Alara heard the commotion from Theron's chambers, voices in the courtyard, the clatter of hooves, and then a woman's voice, clear and commanding, cutting through everything. Where is my niece? Alara ran to the window and looked down. In the courtyard below stood a woman who could only be her mother's sister. She was 45, tall and broad-shouldered, with wild dark hair streaked with silver. She wore traveling leathers and carried a pack that looked like it weighed as much as a small person. But it was her face that made Alara's breath catch. She looked like Liana, the same strong bones, the same fierce eyes, the same bearing that said she would bend for no one. Aunt Seraphina, Alara breathed. Theron stood beside her at the window. That is your mother's sister? Alara nodded, unable to speak. She looks formidable. She is. They met in the great hall. Seraphina took one look at Alara and burst into tears. Oh, little one, you look just like her. Then she pulled Alara into an embrace so fierce it drove the air from her lungs. She smelled like pine forest and wood smoke, and something wild that reminded Alara of childhood, of safety, of home. When Seraphina finally released her, she turned to Theron and studied him with sharp eyes. So you are the king who stopped the ceremony? I am. And you truly wish to marry my niece? More than anything. Seraphina's eyes narrowed. Even knowing she may be barren? Even knowing her bloodline may be cursed? Theron's voice was steady. The only curse here is the one that has kept us apart. Everything else is lies. Something shifted in Seraphina's expression. Approval, perhaps, or respect. Good answer, she said. Then she turned back to Alara. Now, show me what you have learned, Ed. They spent the rest of that day and all of the next in Liana's sealed room. Octavian had given Alara the key, and when she opened the door, it was like stepping back in time. Everything was exactly as her mother had left it. Books on the shelves, dried herbs hanging from the ceiling, a desk covered in papers and journals, and in the center of it all, a wooden chest bound in iron. Seraphina opened it with reverent hands. Inside lay a book, old leather, pages yellowed with age, and on the cover, written in silver ink, 2 words: the sight. This has been passed down through our line for 7 generations, Seraphina said quietly. Your great-great-great-grandmother wrote the first entries. Each woman after added her own wisdom. She lifted the book carefully and handed it to Alara. It is yours now, as it was your mother's, as it will be your daughter's someday. Alara opened the book with trembling hands. The first page bore an inscription in faded ink. To those who see, the sight is not magic, it is not power. It is simply the ability to witness what others overlook, to feel what they hide, to understand what they cannot say. We are not healers through potions or spells. We heal through presence, through listening, through seeing people as they truly are. This is our gift. This is our burden. Use it wisely. Alara read the words twice, 3 times, letting them sink into her bones. Not magic, not supernatural, just the courage to see clearly. Show me how, she said to Seraphina. So her aunt began to teach. The sight, Seraphina explained, worked through layers. The first layer was physical. You learned to notice what bodies told you, the tension in shoulders, the way someone held their breath, the unconscious movements that revealed hidden pain. The second layer was emotional. You learned to feel what others felt. Not through mind reading, but through empathy so deep it bordered on resonance. The third layer was the bonds, the connections between souls. And this was the hardest to see, because most people did not even know these bonds existed. Theron's curse, Seraphina said, is not actually a curse in the traditional sense. It is his body manifesting the pain of an incomplete bond, a mate bond that has been blocked, suppressed, denied. Can I heal it? Alara asked. Not alone. Seraphina's eyes were kind but firm. Healing a bond requires both parties. You must learn to see it clearly, to understand where it has been damaged. But he must choose to open himself to you, to trust, to let go of the walls he has built. That will be the hardest part, Alara said quietly. Yes, but you are your mother's daughter, and she could see through any wall. They practiced for hours. Seraphina brought in a young kitchen maid who had been crying in the pantry that morning. Alara sat with the girl and breathed, matched her rhythm, and slowly she began to see. The maid smiled all day as she worked, laughed with the other servants, went about her duties with practiced efficiency. But beneath it all, Alara felt something else, a weight, a stone sitting heavy in the girl's chest. Your husband, Alara said softly. He died? 2 years ago? The maid's eyes filled with tears. How did you know? Because you carry the grief like a stone, and no one has noticed. No one has given you permission to still mourn him. The maid broke down then, weeping openly. And when she finally looked up, her eyes were clear. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me. And Alara understood. This was the sight, not reading minds, not seeing the future, just noticing what everyone else overlooked, and giving people permission to feel what they had been hiding. You will practice with others, Seraphina said, and with each person, you will learn, not just to see, but to speak truth with compassion. By the 4th day, Alara was ready to try with Theron. She found him in the training yard, sword in hand, going through forms with mechanical precision, but she could see the exhaustion in every movement, the cold eating away at his strength. Stop, she called. He lowered his sword and turned. Sweat gleamed on his skin despite the chill in the air. I need to try something, Alara said. Will you trust me? Always. They returned to his chambers. Alara had him sit by the fire while she knelt before him. She placed both hands on his chest over his heart and closed her eyes. Breathe with me, she instructed. He did, and slowly, carefully, Alara began to see. The mate bond was there, just as she had felt before, golden red and strong, but wrapped around it was not a magical curse. It was fear. Fear so old and deep that it had calcified into physical pain. Fear of being vulnerable, fear of being hurt, fear of opening his heart and finding nothing but emptiness inside. This was what was killing him, not poison, not dark magic, just the very human terror of letting someone in. Tell me about the first time you felt afraid, Alara said softly. Theron's voice was barely a whisper. I was 7. My father took me hunting. We were tracking a great stag through the forest when bandits attacked. My father killed them all, but he was wounded, badly. I tried to help him, tried to stop the bleeding, but he pushed me away. He said, he stopped, swallowed hard. He said, a king does not need help. A king does not show weakness. Remember that. And you have remembered it ever since. Yes. Alara opened her eyes and looked at him, really looked. And she saw not a king, but a boy who had been taught that needing someone meant failure. What if your father was wrong? She asked gently. Theron's eyes met hers, storms gathering behind Gray. What if needing someone is not weakness? Alara continued. What if it is the bravest thing you can do? His breath hitched. What if I am not strong enough? You are. She took his face in her hands. You stopped a ceremony in front of your entire kingdom to claim me. You confessed your illness when you could have hidden it. You asked me to stay when every instinct told you to push me away. That is strength, Theron. That is courage. A tear slid down his cheek, and Alara watched as something inside him finally broke open. The 5th day, Marisiana came to see Alara. She arrived unannounced, sweeping into Liana's room where Alara was studying the grimoire. Serafina tensed beside her, but Alara held up a hand. Leave us, she said quietly. Serafina hesitated. Then she nodded and withdrew, though she left the door ajar. Meridiana stood in the center of the room, surrounded by her dead rival's belongings. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. You are learning your mother's tricks, she said. Her voice held no warmth. They are not tricks, Alara replied calmly. They are truth. Meridiana laughed, bitter and sharp. Truth. What do you know about truth, child? I know you poisoned my mother. Alara stood, the grimoire held against her chest like a shield. I know you have been poisoning me for 8 years. I know you killed Liana because she discovered what you were doing. Meridiana's face went white. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then to Alara's shock, Meridiana's shoulders sagged. Yes, she whispered. I did all of that. Wait, Meridiana moved to the window and looked out over the gardens. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, younger. Because I loved him. Because I thought if I just tried hard enough, worked hard enough, proved myself enough, he would look at me the way he looked at Liana. She turned back, and Alara saw tears on her face. But he never did. Even after she died. Even after I gave him a daughter. Even after years of being everything a wife should be. He would still go to her portrait, still whisper her name in his sleep. Something in Alara's chest twisted. Not pity exactly, but recognition. This was not a villain. This was a woman who had been broken by loving someone who could not love her back. You could have left, Alara said quietly. And go where? Meridiana's laugh was hollow. I was illegitimate, unmarried, disgraced. Your father offered me a chance to be someone, to matter, and I took it. Even though you knew he did not love you. Especially because of that. Meridiana wiped her eyes. I thought if I could just be better than Liana, smarter, stronger, more useful, then maybe, she stopped. But I was not better, and the harder I tried, the more I hated her. And when she discovered what I was doing to you, when she confronted me, you killed her. Yes. Why keep poisoning me? Why not just finish it? Because killing you would have been too obvious, too suspicious. But if you simply faded, if you became so convinced of your own worthlessness that you stepped aside willingly, then Aurelia could take my place, and no one would question it. Meridiana nodded. Alara should have felt rage, should have wanted vengeance, but instead, using the sight, she looked at the woman before her and saw only pain, pain that had curdled into poison. But pain nonetheless. You were wrong, Alara said finally, about everything. My mother was not your enemy. She tried to help you. She agreed to let my father marry you, knowing it would break her heart, because she thought it would give you a chance at happiness. Meridiana's face crumpled. I know, she whispered. That is what made it so much worse. She was kind, and I hated her for it. Alara took a deep breath, then she did something her mother would have done. I forgive you, she said. Meridiana's head snapped up. What? I forgive you not because you deserve it, not because what you did was acceptable, but because holding on to hatred will only poison me the way jealousy poisoned you. You cannot mean that. I do. Alara's voice was steady. But forgiveness does not mean forgetting. And it does not mean there will be no consequences. You will face trial for what you have done. You will answer for my mother's death. Meridiana nodded slowly. I know. She moved toward the door, then paused. Your mother would be proud of you, she said quietly. You are stronger than I ever was. Then she was gone, and Alara stood alone in her mother's room, trembling with emotions she could not name. The sixth day, a rider arrived from the capital. Alara was with Theron when the messenger burst into the council chamber, breathless and wild-eyed. Your Majesty, he gasped. The witch Isolde sends word. She begs audience immediately. She says it concerns the curse on your bond. Theron and Alara exchanged glances. Bring her, Theron commanded. Isolde arrived that evening. She was younger than Alara expected, 26 at most, with long red hair and eyes that had seen too much. She carried a worn leather satchel and walked with the careful movements of someone used to being hunted. She knelt before Theron, her head bowed. Rise, he said, and speak. Isolde stood, her hands twisting together. Your Majesty, I am the herbalist who created the suppressants Lady Meridiana gave to Lady Alara. I come to confess my part and to offer what help I can. Why now? Alara asked. Because I cannot live with what I have done. Isolde's voice broke. Lady Meridiana came to me 8 years ago when you were 15. She said she needed herbs to help her stepdaughter through a difficult moon cycle. I believed her. I gave her what she asked for. But they were not 4 moon cycles, Alara said. No, Isolde's tears fell freely now. They were designed to suppress the mate bond, to make it impossible for you to recognize your true mate, to cloud your instincts and weaken your wolf. Alara felt Theron's hand find hers beneath the table. When did you realize the truth? He asked. 2 years ago, I saw Lady Alara at a festival. She looked so pale, so thin, and I knew. Isolde covered her face with her hands. I knew what I had helped do to her, but I was afraid. Meridiana threatened to expose my daughter's illegitimacy if I spoke, so I stayed silent. And now? Now I hear that Lady Alara has stopped taking the supplements, that her gift is awakening, and I realize that my silence makes me complicit in attempted murder. Isolde dropped to her knees again. I beg your mercy, and I offer everything I know to help undo the damage. Theron looked to Alara. Your choice, he said quietly. Alara studied the woman kneeling before her. Through the sight, she saw guilt, genuine remorse, and a desperate hope for redemption. Tell us everything, Alara said. Help us heal this bond, and I will speak for mercy at your trial. Isolde's sob was one of pure relief. She opened her satchel and pulled out journals, notes, recipes, years of documentation. The suppressant works in layers, she explained. First, it dulls the wolf's instincts, makes it hard to hear your own beast. Second, it clouds emotional recognition. You can feel attraction, but not the mate pull. Third, it creates a kind of fog over the bond itself. Can it be reversed? Theron asked. Yes, but not with another herb or potion. Isolde looked between them. The bond heals itself once the suppressant is gone, but there is damage that must be addressed. What kind of damage? Your Majesty, your illness is not a curse. Isolde's voice gentled. It is your body's response to an incomplete bond. When a wolf finds their true mate but cannot complete the connection, it creates a kind of starvation. Your body is eating itself from the inside, desperate for what it cannot have. How do we fix it? Alara asked. You complete the bond. Isolde met her eyes. Fully, without barriers, without walls, you must trust each other completely. And you, she turned to Theron, must stop fighting against it. Theron's jaw tightened. I am not. Yes, you are. Isolde's voice was firm but kind. You have spent 3 years convinced that needing her makes you weak, that opening yourself to her means losing control. But that fear is what is killing you, Your Majesty. Not magic, not poison, just fear. The words hung in the air, and Alara watched as Theron's face crumpled with recognition. You are right, he whispered. On the 7th day they married, not in the great hall before the entire kingdom. That would come later, the formal ceremony for the people. This wedding was small, private, sacred. They gathered in the chapel adjacent to the royal quarters. Only Seraphina and Lord Octavian in attendance, the high priestess from the mountain temple officiating. Alara walked down the aisle in her mother's wedding dress. Seraphina had found it preserved in a trunk. Simple white silk, clean lines, the kind of gown a woman wore when she wanted to be seen for herself. At the altar, Theron waited. He looked better than he had in weeks. Not fully healed, but the color had returned to his skin. The sharp angles of his face had softened slightly, and when he saw Alara in her mother's dress, something raw and wondering shifted in his expression. "You are beautiful," he said quietly. "You are alive," she replied. "That is all I care about." The priestess began the old rites. Not political alliance, not contract. True binding, sealed in blood and soul. "Theron of House Blackmore, do you recognize this woman as your mate?" "I do." "And do you offer her your bond freely, knowing that once given, it can never be reclaimed?" "I offer it freely." His voice was steady. "More freely than I have ever offered anything in my life." When the same questions came to Alara, she answered with equal certainty. "Then let the bond be sealed." Theron tilted her head to expose her neck. His lips brushed her pulse. Then his teeth descended, piercing her skin. The pain transformed immediately into something electric. It arced through her entire body, lighting up every nerve. The bond snapped into place, and suddenly she could feel everything he felt. His relief, his wonder, his overwhelming gratitude. His wolf wrapping around her consciousness like an embrace. Finally, she heard him think through their new connection. After 3 years of reaching and never touching, finally, she marked him in return, tasting something golden and vast beneath the remnants of pain. "It is done," the priestess declared. "What the gods have bound, let no mortal sever." That night in the royal chambers, they came together with a tenderness that took Alara's breath away. Theron was careful, patient, asking permission at every step. And when they finally joined, the bond between them blazed so bright it drove back every shadow. The curse retreated, the cold fled, the walls crumbled. And in their place was warmth, connection, completion. Afterward, they lay tangled in the furs, her head on his chest, his arm around her waist. Through the bond, she felt his contentment, a deep, settled peace that she suspected was unfamiliar to him. "Stay," she murmured sleepily. "I am not going anywhere," he said. "Not tonight, not ever again." She fell asleep to the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear, warmer than it had been in 3 years. Alara woke to shouting. She sat up, disoriented. Beside her, Theron was already reaching for his sword. The bond between them hummed with sudden alertness. "What is it?" she asked. Before he could answer, someone pounded on the door. "Your Majesty!" Lord Octavian's voice, urgent and strained. Theron threw on a robe and opened the door. Alara wrapped herself in a fur and followed. Octavian's face was grim. "Lady Meridiana has fled," he said. "She took Lady Aurelia with her." They left in the night with a small group of loyal servants. By the time the guards noticed, they were already gone. Theron swore under his breath. "Where?" he demanded. "The scouts tracked them east." Octavian paused. "Toward Windmere." "Lyanna's birthplace," Alara whispered. Octavian nodded. "It seems she is making for the old estate, perhaps hoping to hide there, or what?" Theron asked. The old man's eyes were troubled. "Or perhaps she is going there to finish what she started, to destroy the last traces of Lyanna's legacy before she faces trial." Alara's blood ran cold. Her mother's papers, the evidence, the final pieces of truth that could prove everything. If Meridiana burned it all, if she destroyed the last remnants of Lyanna's work. "We have to go after them," Alara said. Theron turned to her. His hand found hers, their bond singing with shared determination. "Then we ride at dawn," he said, "and we finish this." They rode out as the sun broke over the eastern mountains. Alara sat astride a gray mare, dressed in riding leathers that Seraphina had found for her. Theron rode beside her on a black stallion, his color better than it had been in years. The bond between them hummed steady and strong, a golden thread connecting their hearts. Behind them came a small group, Lord Octavian, Dame Corinne, the royal healer, and Seraphina, who had insisted on coming despite her age. "You will need me before this is over," she had said. "Trust me." The journey to Windmere would take 3 days by horse. 3 days through forests that had once belonged to Lyanna's family. 3 days retracing the path of a woman who had died trying to protect her daughter. Alara could feel her mother's presence in every mile they traveled. The first day, they stopped at a village where Lyanna had lived as a child. It was small, a handful of cottages clustered around a well, fields stretching out toward distant hills. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and strangers were rare. An old woman came out to greet them. She took one look at Alara and gasped. "Lyanna's girl," she breathed. "Oh, child, you have her eyes." The woman's name was Martha. She had been Lyanna's nursemaid when she was young, and she remembered everything. They sat in her cottage while she brought out tea and honey cakes and stories that had been locked away for decades. "Your mother was wild," Martha said, her old eyes distant with memory. She would climb trees higher than the boys dared. She would swim in the river during storms. Her father despaired of ever making her into a proper lady. Alara smiled despite the ache in her chest. That sounds like her. But she was also kind. Martha's voice softened. Once she found a wounded fox in the forest. Everyone said to leave it, that it would bite her. But Liana brought it home and nursed it back to health, spent weeks caring for it, and when it was strong enough, she let it go. She could have kept it, Alara said quietly. Martha shook her head. Your mother understood something most people never learn. Love is not about keeping. It is about setting free. The words settled into Alara's bones like a truth she had always known but never named. That night, as they camped under the stars, Theron asked her what she was thinking. I am thinking about my mother, Alara said, about how much of her I never knew, how much was stolen from me. Theron's arm tightened around her shoulders. You carry her with you, in everything you do, every choice you make. Through their bond, Alara felt his certainty, his conviction, and she let herself believe it. The second day, they followed a river that Liana used to swim in. The water ran clear and cold, tumbling over smooth stones. Trees hung low over the banks, their branches dipping into the current. It was beautiful, peaceful, the kind of place that healed just by existing. They stopped to water the horses, and Serafina drew Alara aside. Come with me, she said. There is something you need to see. She led Alara downstream to a place where the river widened into a pool. The water there was deep and still, reflecting the sky like polished glass, and carved into a boulder at the water's edge were words. Liana Winmere, age 16. I was here. I lived. I loved. Alara's breath caught. She carved this, Serafina said quietly, the summer before she met your father. She told me she wanted to leave proof that she existed, that her life mattered. Alara reached out and traced the letters with her fingertips. The stone was warm from the sun, solid, real. It mattered, she whispered. Mama, your life mattered. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment Alara could have sworn she heard her mother's laugh. That afternoon they passed through a clearing where wildflowers grew in riotous color. Theron dismounted and picked a handful, blue and gold and deep purple. He brought them to Alara with something almost shy in his expression. Your mother's favorites, he said. Lord Octavian told me. He said she used to weave them into crowns and wear them like a queen. How did you know I would want them? Because I am learning you. Through the bond, she felt his smile. And I know you carry her in everything. Alara took the flowers and tucked them into her braid. Their scent was sweet, alive, hopeful. Thank you, she said. For what? For seeing me, for seeing her, for understanding that they are the same thing. Theron kissed her forehead. I will spend the rest of my life seeing you, he promised. On the third day, they reached Winmere. The estate sat atop a hill, overlooking a valley that stretched green and gold to the horizon. It had once been grand. Alara could see that in the bones of it, the stone walls, the tall windows, the gardens that had grown wild but still held traces of careful design. But it had fallen into disrepair. The roof sagged in places, shutters hung crooked, weeds grew between the cobblestones. This was where her mother had been born, where she had learned to be strong, where she had dreamed of the future before reality came to break her. Smoke rose from one of the chimneys. They are here, Octavian said quietly. Theron's hand went to his sword, but Alara stopped him. No, she said, no violence, not here. This place has seen enough pain. Then what do you suggest? I go in alone. Absolutely not, Theron said immediately. The bond flared with his protective instinct. But Alara held his gaze. Meridiana is not a warrior, she said gently. She is a broken woman who made terrible choices. And Aurelia is just a girl who never had a chance to be anything else. They do not need a king with a sword. They need someone who can see them clearly. Theron struggled with this. She felt it through their connection. His need to protect her warring with his trust in her judgment. Finally, he nodded. But I will be right outside, he said. If you need me, I will call. She touched his cheek. I promise. Alara walked to the front door alone. It was unlocked. She pushed it open and stepped into a hall that smelled of dust and old memories. Sunlight filtered through dirty windows, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. She could hear voices coming from deeper in the house, one angry, one pleading. Alara followed the sound. She found them in what had once been a library. Shelves lined the walls, but most of the books were gone. Only a few remained, spine broken and forgotten. Meridiana stood by the fireplace, feeding papers into the flames. Her face was haggard, Her hair had come loose from its pins. She looked like a woman who had not slept in days. And in the corner, huddled on the floor, was Aurelia. Alara's stepsister looked even younger than 19. Her golden hair hung limp around her shoulders. Her beautiful dress was stained with travel. And her eyes were red and swollen from crying. "Mother, please," Aurelia was saying. "We should go back. We will face nothing." Meridiana threw another paper into the fire. "I will not let them destroy us. I will not let that girl take everything we have worked for." Then Meridiana looked up and saw Alara standing in the doorway. For a moment, no one moved. Then Meridiana laughed, bitter and broken. "Of course you followed," she said. "Of course you could not just let us go." Alara stepped into the room. Her eyes went to the papers burning in the fireplace. Her mother's handwriting, curling and blackening. "Those are my mother's journals," she said quietly. "Yes." Meridiana threw another handful into the flames. "And when they are gone, there will be no proof, no evidence. Just my word against yours." Aurelia stood up from the corner. "Mother, stop, please." "Be quiet," Meridiana snapped. "This is all your fault. If you had just been strong enough, smart enough, worthy enough, none of this would have happened." The words hit Aurelia like a physical blow. She flinched and wrapped her arms around herself. And Alara saw. Through the sight, she saw everything. Aurelia was not an accomplice. She was a victim. She had spent 19 years trying to earn a love that would never come. 19 years being told she was not good enough, not special enough, not Liana's daughter. 19 years believing that if she just tried harder, her mother would finally see her. But Meridiana had never seen her. Not really. She had only seen a tool, a means to an end, a replacement for the daughter she could never have. Alara's heart broke for the girl in the corner. "Stop," she said. Meridiana whirled on her. "You do not give me orders." "Yes, I do." Alara's voice was calm, steady. "I am the Luna now, and I am telling you to stop burning my mother's papers." "Or what?" Meridiana's eyes were wild. "You will have me arrested, executed? Go ahead, I am already dead." "The moment you stopped that ceremony, I was finished." Alara walked slowly toward the fireplace. Meridiana backed away, clutching the remaining papers to her chest. "I do not want you dead," Alara said gently. "I want you to face what you have done. I want you to understand the cost of your choices, and I want you to let Aurelia go." Meridiana's face crumpled. "Let her go? She is all I have. She is the only thing I did right." "No," Alara shook her head. "She is the only thing you had left to control. But she is not yours, Meridiana. She is her own person. And you have spent her entire life making her feel like she was not enough." "That is not true," Meridiana looked to Aurelia, desperate. Tell her that is not true." But Aurelia was crying, silent tears streaming down her face. "It is true," she whispered. "You have never loved me. Not really. You only loved what I could give you, a crown, a title, a chance to matter." Meridiana staggered as if struck. "I gave you everything," she said hoarsely. "You gave me nothing." Aurelia's voice broke. "You told me I had to be perfect, that I had to be better than Alara, that I had to earn your love. But it was never enough. I was never enough. Because you are not Liana's daughter." The words tore out of Meridiana like a confession. "You are mine, and nothing I do can change that. Nothing I do can make Cassian look at you the way he looked at her." The truth hung in the air, raw and bleeding. And Alara understood. This had never been about her. Not really. It had been about Meridiana's desperate, futile attempt to erase Liana, to replace her, to become her. "But you cannot replace someone by destroying them," Alara said softly. "You can only lose yourself trying." Meridiana sank into a chair. The papers slipped from her hands and scattered across the floor. "I know," she whispered. "I have known that for years. But I could not stop. I did not know how." Alara knelt beside her, close enough to touch, but not touching. "You stop by choosing differently," she said, "right now, in this moment. You can choose to keep burning papers and running, or you can choose to face what you have done and try to make it right. It is too late for that." "It is never too late." Alara's voice was firm. "My mother taught me that. She taught me that the bravest thing a woman can do is admit when she is wrong and try to be better. Liana would never have forgiven me. Maybe not." Alara met her eyes. "But I will. If you stop now, if you let Aurelia choose her own path, if you face trial with honesty instead of denial." Meridiana's tears fell silently. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you forgive me?" "Because holding on to hatred will poison me the way jealousy poisoned you." Alara stood and offered her hand. And because my mother would have wanted me to be better than that. For a long moment, Meridiana stared at Alara's outstretched hand. Then slowly she took it. The trial was held in the great hall of Castle Blackmore, but this was not the trial anyone expected. Theron had declared that there would be no execution, no dungeon, no public spectacle of vengeance. Instead, it would be said there would be truth. Meridiana stood before the assembly, no longer dressed in fine silks but in simple gray. The color of humility, the color of penance, and she told the truth. All of it. She confessed to poisoning Liana, to decades of manipulating Cassian, to suppressing Alara's mate bond with herbs and lies, to stealing 8 years of her stepdaughter's life. The hall listened in silence. Some faces showed horror. Others showed pity. A few showed satisfaction at seeing the proud woman brought low. But Alara, sitting beside Theron in the Luna's chair, felt only a deep, aching sadness. When Meridiana finished, Lord Octavian stood. "The crimes you have confessed to warrant death under our laws," he said gravely. "I know," Meridiana replied quietly, "but Luna Alara has requested a different sentence." All eyes turned to Alara. She stood, and the hall fell silent. "Meridiana Ashford," Alara said clearly, "you took my mother from me. You stole years of my life. You tried to destroy my bond with my mate. These are crimes that cannot be undone." Meridiana bowed her head. "But execution will not bring my mother back," Alara continued. "It will not heal what has been broken. It will only add more death to a story that has had too much already." She took a breath. "Therefore, I ask this council to impose a different sentence, one that serves justice while allowing for redemption." The room waited. "Meridiana will be stripped of her title and lands. She will publicly read my mother's journal, so all may know the truth of Liana Winmere's life and death. And then she will be sent to the Sisters of Mercy at Thornwood Abbey." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The sisters were healers. They took in women who had nowhere else to go and taught them to serve others. It was not a prison, but it was not freedom either. It was a life of atonement through service. "There," Ilara said, "Meridiana will spend her days caring for the sick and forgotten. She will learn what it means to give without expectation of reward. And perhaps, in time, she will find the peace that has always escaped her." The council members looked to one another. Then one by one they nodded. Lord Cassian stood. His face was drawn, aged. "I accept this judgment," he said hoarsely, "and I beg the court's permission to speak." Theron gestured for him to continue. Cassian turned to face Alara. For the first time in years, he truly looked at her. "I have been a coward," he said, his voice shook. "I allowed my wife to poison my daughter. I stood by while she was broken down and made to believe she was worthless. I chose comfort over truth, and I have no right to ask for your forgiveness." Alara held his gaze. "You are my father," she said quietly, "by blood, if not by action, and I will not carry hatred for you." She paused. "But you are right. You were a coward, and forgiveness does not erase that. It just means I will not let your weakness define my life." Cassian nodded slowly. Then he did something unexpected. He removed the signet ring of House Ashford from his finger and held it out. "I am not worthy to lead this house," he said. "I ask the king's permission to step down, and I name Lord Octavian Greythorn as my successor." The hall erupted in whispers, but Octavian stood and accepted the ring. "I will serve House Ashford with the honor it deserves," he said, "and I will ensure that Lyanna Winmere's legacy is never forgotten." Theron stood. "So be it," he declared. "Lord Cassian Ashford, you are relieved of your duties. You may retire to a small estate in the southern provinces. You will live simply, quietly, and you will think on the choices that brought you here." Cassian bowed his head. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Then there was only one person left. Aurelia stepped forward. She had been sitting quietly in the back of the hall, and many had forgotten she was there. But now she came to stand before Alara. She was still beautiful, still young, but something in her eyes had changed. She looked less like a girl playing at being a princess and more like a woman waking from a long dream. "I did not know," she said softly, "about the murder, about the full extent of what my mother did. I swear to you, I did not know." "I believe you," Alara said. Aurelia's eyes filled with tears. "But I knew something was wrong," she continued. "I knew you were suffering, and I told myself it was not my concern, that it was better for me if you stepped in. That made me complicit." "Yes," Alara agreed gently. "It did." "I am sorry," Aurelia's voice broke. "I am so sorry." Alara looked at her stepsister. Through the sight, she saw a girl who had spent 19 years trying to be someone she was not. A girl who had been shaped by a mother's bitterness and a father's absence. A girl who had never been allowed to simply be herself. "What do you want, Aurelia?" Alara asked. "If you could choose your own path, what would you choose?" Aurelia blinked, surprised by the question. "I do not know," she admitted. "I have spent my whole life being what others wanted me to be. I do not know who I am without that." "Then I will give you the chance to find out," Alara said. "You will not be banished. You will not be punished. But you will work. You will serve." "Serve how?" "There are children in this kingdom who have lost their mothers, orphans who need care. I am establishing a house for them to be run by the Sisters of Mercy. You will work there. You will learn what it means to give love without expecting anything in return." Aurelia stared at her. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you give me this chance?" "Because my mother believed in second chances," Alara said, "and because I believe you can be better than what you were raised to be." Aurelia fell to her knees. "I will," she promised. "I swear I will." Alara helped her stand. "Then we begin today," she said. 9 months later, on a morning when the world was soft with new snow, Alara went into labor. She had spent the months since the trial transforming the kingdom. New laws protecting mate bonds. The orphan house thriving under Aurelia's care. The Sisters of Mercy reporting that Meridiana was slowly, painfully learning to serve without seeking glory. But now, as contractions rippled through her body, none of that mattered. Now there was only the pain, the pressure, the overwhelming force of a new life demanding to be born. Theron stayed by her side through it all, his hand gripped in hers, his presence steady through their bond. "You are doing wonderfully," Dame Corinne said. "Almost there, my lady." Seraphina stood at the foot of the bed, ready to catch the child when it came. And in the corner, Lord Octavian waited with Aurelia, both of them here to witness this new beginning. "One more push," Dame Corinne urged. Alara bore down with everything she had. The pain crested, unbearable and infinite. And then suddenly it was over. A baby's cry filled the room. "It is a girl," Seraphina said, her voice thick with tears. "A beautiful, perfect girl." She placed the baby on Alara's chest, warm and wet and wailing, tiny fists waving at the injustice of being born into cold air. Alara looked down at her daughter and felt her heart crack open. She had her father's dark hair, her grandmother's fierce eyes, and lungs that suggested she would never be silent about what she wanted. "Hello, little one," Alara whispered. "Welcome." Theron pressed a kiss to Alara's temple, then to their daughter's head. "She is perfect," he said roughly. "What will you name her?" Seraphina asked. Alara looked up at her aunt, at Octavian, at Aurelia, who was crying quietly in the corner. Then she looked down at the baby in her arms. "Liana," she said. "Her name is Liana." That evening, when visitors had left and the baby slept in a cradle by the bed, Alara stood by the window and looked out over the kingdom. Snow fell softly, blanketing everything in white, pure, clean, new. Behind her, Theron stirred. "Come back to bed," he said through their bond. But Alara stayed a moment longer. She thought of her mother, of the woman who had died protecting her, who had hidden truth and antidotes and love in every corner she could find, who had taught her daughter that bending was not breaking, that falling was not failing, that the measure of a woman was not in never being wounded, but in how she rose after. "Thank you, Mama," Alara whispered to the falling snow, "for everything, for showing me how to be strong, how to be kind, how to be myself." The wind carried her words away, and somewhere in the space between snow and stars, Alara could have sworn she heard her mother's reply. "You did beautifully, my darling. I always knew you would." She thought of the river, the stone where her mother had carved her name so many years ago. Liana Winmere, age 16. "I was here. I lived. I loved." One day, Alara would take little Liana there, and together they would stand at that stone, 3 generations of women bound by love stronger than death. Alara turned from the window and went back to bed. She settled beside Theron, his arm coming around her automatically. The baby slept peacefully between them, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. Through the bond, Alara felt Theron's contentment, his joy, his overwhelming love, and she sent back the same. This was her life now, not the one she had been promised, not the one she had expected, but the one she had fought for, the one she had earned. She was Luna of Blackmore, mother, wife, unbinder, healer of broken bonds, but most importantly, she was herself, Alara Blackmore, daughter of Liana Winmere, a woman who had bent but not broken, who had fallen but risen, who had knelt before her displacement and then stood as a queen. She closed her eyes and let sleep come. And as she drifted off, she felt 3 generations of women surrounding her in the dark. Her mother, her daughter, herself. Strong, whole, free. The bond between them unbreakable. The legacy continuing. Some bonds once forged could never be broken. Some stories, once begun, would echo through eternity. And some women, once risen, would never bow again.